Hey, welcome to Bible Adventure. We're here today with Jake Ramhan. He is a zoologist and he's a creationist. And here I would like to introduce him. He's now his partner with Bible Adventure. He has a he's from New Creation Blogs, but right now he started a new website and YouTube channel called Reformation. Recently we have a conference here, and I'm really glad that I can partner with him. I think he's going to bring a great Reformation here in Massachusetts. So it's a really honor to meet him. But right now I would like to ask him a couple scientific questions on zoology. He's focusing on he has a research going into speciation after the flood, and it is really interesting to find out how is it possible that we have so many different animals that fit on the ark. How would you say all the animals that we have today, like we have chihuahuas, we have Great Danes, we have wolves or zebras, how did Noah fit all those animals on the ark?
Well, for a long time now, creationists have postulated that the term that God uses to describe the animals when he brings them to Noah is according to their kinds. It's also how he created them, is according to their kinds. Now, kind is not really a scientific term. It's one we look at from the ancient Hebrew. We try to figure out what does kind mean. But the consensus now among most creationists is that kind is a much higher taxonomic level than species. So that does not mean that God brought two of every species to Noah to put on the ark, but that kind is something, and we haven't really figured out what it is yet, but it is something higher than a species. So instead of rather bringing two chihuahuas and two Great Danes and two gray wolves onto the ark, Noah probably only had two dogs. This is a very common idea throughout all creation literature, that there were two of every kind on the ark. And so that, if you kind of do the math and you estimate how many kinds that there would be around that time, you can fit all air-breathing, land-dwelling animals, two of each kind, onto the ark with plenty of room to spare. So it's been done before. That's why there's a whole ark encounter built down in Kentucky at the Answers in Genesis Museum down there. And so it does fit if you look at creation that way.
One of my questions is, would you think some of the amphibian creatures, would they be on the ark if they can survive in water?
Yeah, so we do kind of read into the phrase there that says the breath of life. And so as all creatures that have the breath of life. And so we've come to some conclusions based on that. We don't think, for example, that insects were on the ark. Insects do not have lungs. They don't necessarily breathe the way other creatures do. They breathe through their skin, and it's just not the same. So we don't think they would have counted and they didn't bring two termites on the ark, for example, or two grasshoppers. But amphibians, they do start in a lung. They have gills at the start stage, and then they undergo metamorphosis, and they have lungs in their adult form. So most creationists would actually put amphibians on the ark, especially because if you cover the world in the ocean water, it's going to be salt water. And so most amphibians are not well adapted to living in salt water today. They tend to be more freshwater, and freshwater ecosystems tend to be on land. So we kind of consider them land creatures and say, yes, Noah did have two of each kind of amphibian on the ark.
Also, you were focusing on speciation after the flood. So, yes. For example, right now we have many different species. How fast do you think the speciation goes? For example, if you have, let's say, Noah had two felines on the ark.
Yeah.
How fast would they turn into a house cat or a lion? How fast did the restriction would go?
Well, it always depends. It depends on what conditions they're under. It depends on, whether they're what's kind of where they are in life. It really depends on so many different conditions. So with cats, obviously, we have lots of different variations of cats, even of domesticated cats. There are many different, all sorts of shapes, sizes, and colors. And that's because under certain conditions, we know things can change really, really quickly. And for the domestic cat, it was because it was domesticated. We domesticated the cat, and then humans actually bred them to the point where we had specialized house cats back in the times of ancient Egypt, right? So it can happen very quickly under domestication. It can happen very quickly if an animal is colonizing a new landmass. So if an animal, say, goes from a mainland onto an island, it's going to colonize the new ecosystem it finds on the island. And that can also speed up speciation. So while speciation, generally speaking, doesn't exactly happen before your eyes, we found in certain cases it can happen very, very rapidly. And so one of the areas I've done research in is in something called contemporary evolution. And a lot of creationists get kind of nervous when I say the word evolution. But for a long time, we've talked about the microevolution versus macroevolution thing. And so this is kind of like microevolution. It's evolution that everyone can kind of observe and see happening. And what's cool about contemporary evolution is that it happens in less than 10 years in some cases. And it's not to say that there's a new species. This isn't the same as speciation. It's not one species becoming two species, but it's one population of a species, and it's split, and it actually splits at some point to make two different populations that end up having very different traits, and to the point where you can see, that they're in two different trajectories. And we've never really known what a species is. There are dozens of different definitions of species, but in this case, you can often kind of show up and see these two different populations. And in a lot of cases, you can say these look kind of like two different species, and no one's named them yet. No one's come in and said it's that kind of bird and it's that kind of bird, but they're two populations in two different trajectories, and that split can happen in very, very short periods of time, like under a decade. So it's even discovered by not evolutionists, but by conservationists who are out in the field. They're putting together conservation plans to try and preserve a forest or try and preserve a species. And they've noticed that animals adapt and change really, really quickly to fit their new environments. And it happens a lot faster than the evolutionists would have predicted.
So now let's think about this. So back on the ark, there were how many animals would you think was on the ark? Do you think this rapid speciation brings animal like, let's say we have bovine, right? The cows and sheep. Would you think they are the same kind? Like, let's say, because Bible talks about sheep from the first chapter, right? And we have many different cattle, right? Would you say they're the same created kind, sheep and a cow, or two different created kinds?
Yeah. So what we've stumbled on here is a different field in creation biology. So a lot of people say creation biology is like a pseudoscience. It's not really part of science. And we creationists would actually disagree, because you can have multiple different fields of research. And so where my specialty lies is in kind of how speciation can happen quickly, how diversification can happen quickly. But there are other creation biologists who are going into the area of what is in the same created kind and what is not in the same created kind. And there's a whole field behind it. It has a name. It's called baraminology. And baraminologists have been kind of working on this for a long time. There's lots of literature out there where they take lots of different physical traits or even genetic traits, and they compare them between one individual and another individual of different species. And you line them up together, and you're trying to find out, do they match as the same type, general type? Do these things, are they the same created kind? And we've come up with a lot of controversy, a lot of disagreement, but also a lot of good results that have been published out there. And so, again, that's not where my specialty is. So I would kind of leave that up to the baraminologist to figure out. But if you're interested in bovines, I think bovines have been done before. And so we can kind of find the literature on that and see, does a sheep line up with a cow? But again, my specialty is I've kind of tried to tackle the question, how does one kind become different types of species over time?
All right, I'll ask you a question on speciation. For example, right there, I have a fish tank.
Yep.
And I create a huge cave in there because it's and I bought an orange goldfish. Well, after a couple months or maybe a year, that goldfish turned white. Do you think if it has an offspring, will the offspring going to be white, or they going to be back to orange?
This is a very really new kind of field of research that has come and opened up, and I'm happy to say that creationists are kind of right in the forefront of this. So the Institute for Creation Research, for example, is one of the big creation organizations, and they've been doing research on cavefish and cave salamanders, and I think especially cavefish, and they're seeing that they can create these new traits really, really quickly in just singular generations. And so it's because of that, because an animal, they're thinking of animals as something that is engineered. And it's engineered by a creator to immediately adapt to whatever environment it's placed in. So your goldfish turned white in a cave because it no longer needs the pigmentation on its skin to stand out, because it's recognizing that it's in a dark environment. It doesn't need that pigmentation. So the energy it's putting to pigmentation is kind of being turned off. And that's happening internally to the fish. The fish is doing that internally. It's not something that, of course, it was instigated by something happening in its environment, but the change is happening within itself. That's really encouraging for creationists to think of animals spreading out after the flood. When they are placed in a new environment, they change internally to fit that environment. And so, like I said, ICR has done a lot of research in that, and they've developed a really cool model called continuous environmental tracking. And again, as someone who is doing research in this area, I've kept tabs on that very closely and listened to Randy Galuza kind of publish articles and speak on that, which is, again, the idea that an organism is constantly paying attention to its environment. And then when it senses a change, it adapts to that change pretty instantly. And to answer your question, yes, if the environment of the cave continues to persist, then its offspring would probably match its parents and continue to be white. But if you put that goldfish back into a normal tank with lots of sunlight and kind of recreate that environment, then I think you'd expect to see the offspring kind of move back towards the original state, which is something, again, ICR has done a lot of research in. So really, really cool ideas, really cool zoology. This is the stuff that gets a zoologist excited.
One more question. How would evolution explain that? How would evolutionists explain the rapid adaptation? Would they say that this fish back in its previous life used to be in cave many times and adapted to a cave, and now it just finding those genes from the previous life? Or they say it just adapted to adapt that quick?
Yeah, I would say evolutionists would kind of, I don't think this necessarily refutes all of evolution. Again, Darwin's vision was that this would happen through selection. You'd have a group of fish, and if you put them in a cave environment, some of them might be better adapted to a cave, and those ones will live on, and the ones that don't work well in the cave, they die off. And eventually, over a long period of time, you get fish that look like this, or that are they look specially designed to live in their environment, but it takes lots of generations and takes lots and lots of time. So that's why evolutionists weren't looking for this kind of rapid processes that creationists are now using as evidence. They did find it, but it took them a lot longer to find it because they weren't looking for rapid adaptations. They thought that it had to happen over long periods of time because of natural selection and how slow that operates. So while it's not a refutation of evolution, again, evolutionists will even publish works and they'll call this like evolution right before our eyes, right? Because it's new traits developing in very short periods of time. So it excites them as well, but it's also not something that they predicted. But from a creation model, it's very easily predicted because we look at all the biodiversity we have today and we think everything was on the ark as two of each kind. And so to bridge that gap of 4,500 years, you would expect to find adaptations and speciation happening really, really quickly. And the speciation has slowed down over the years, right? Things don't speciate as quickly as we think that they used to. But the fact that every now and then you put something in a new environment and it changes really, really quickly, that's encouraging research for a creationist. And it's something that it doesn't refute evolution, but the evolutionists didn't expect it, and we did. So I would call it a win for creationists.
No, that is awesome. I think this is awesome. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
If anything, he has his Creation Reformation website now going, so you can check that out. Also, his YouTube channel is amazing. He's going around local areas and explaining like beaver dams, and it's amazing. I watch his videos today. Like I keep watching at work. So good stuff he has there.
CreationReformationNewEngland.com. We have links to this place. We have videos, links to the YouTube channel. You can book museum tours. You can go through a natural history museum and you have a guided tour. And so all sorts of resources. We have a blog coming out. But great to join forces with you, Ivan. And thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right.